Thank you. Okay, I'd like to call this session of the Board of Vision to order and acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Ojibwe, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 41st Nation and Treaty 3 territory. With me today are Robert Hutchings and Kerry Linkletter. My name is Harvey Diamond, and we form the panel that's hearing these matters. Our administrator is Crystal Hartland, and the City Assessment Department is represented by Nathan Kupfer. To the Zoom participants of the hearing, please note that you are placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it is your turn, you will be admitted into the meeting. Kindly follow along the City of Winnipeg's Boardroom Vision YouTube channel for the hearing process. Once the host admits you into the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player. You'll then be permitted to speak with respect to your property. And once your hearing has concluded, you can leave the meeting. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rules in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision are requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and when speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised the comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered as evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decision on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and will issue a written order that will mail to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or to classification, or if the Court of King's Bench the matter pertains to application for exemption from taxation. And should you wish to appeal, information on do so will be included with our order. We expect the hearing process. So confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed to each applicant following their swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by any questions. And each side will be given an opportunity to summarize if they wish to do so. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today, and the session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You receive the board's order by written mail as soon as possible. And as information, all public records are live streamed, recorded, and will form part of a public record. Today we'll be hearing items 1 through 3 and 6 through 8 that are on the docket today. And Ms. Harlan, you can please confirm the assessor's testimony and the applicant of the first matter that we're hearing?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Assessor, would you please stand and state your full name?
Nathan Kupfer.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may be seated. Thank you. Mr. Assessor, would you please state your full name?
Abhishek Ratan.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
You may be seated. Thank you. Mr. Chair, our first applicant has not shown up in person or on Zoom.
Okay, so we'll stand that matter down and we'll proceed with item number 2, which is one of Mr. Smith's 2 applications. So we can swear in Mr. Smith then?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, would you please state your full name?
Trevor Smith.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Yeah, thank you. So the first matter that we're hearing today then is item number 2, which is 170 Gary Street. And the assessment department can proceed with their evidence as soon as they're ready.
File number 24-3893, roll number 12093194000, address 170 Gary Street. Owner is a numbered company, 100283225 Manitoba Limited. We are assessing the property for 2025 based on reference date 1st April 2023 as $1,425,000 using land value. The land area is 12,122 square feet. On page 2, we can see some photographs of our subject property. It is a rectangular shaped lot. The second photograph shows the street view. On page 3, we can see a photograph of the picture showing the land area. Page 4 shows a sales history which has a registration date of December 5, 2018, which was considered for $1, but the sworn value is $579,000. On page 5, I have some parking rent comparables. Though this property is valued on land, but I still thought that we still thought it would be good to have some rent comparables of this region. According to me, the best comparable for this property would be comparable number 3, which is 252 4th Street, which is valued at $137.95 per stroke. Page 6 to 7 speaks about the capitalization rate. Since the property is being valued at land approach, we can ignore the cap rates. Going ahead from page 8 to page 9, from page 8 to page 19, we have a submitted income and expense mailer. Since I was talking about that the subject property is being valued at land, I have some land comparables on page 20. The best comparable for our subject property from this table would be comparable number 3, 175 Donald Street. So the best comparable from this table would be comparable for that's 330 Donald Street, which is 18,000 square feet, valued at $132 per square feet of land. The subject property has an area of 12,000 square feet, which is valued at a net rent of $117. So we can see that from the table above, the mean and the median comes around 133, but we are valuing it at 117, which is below the market rate. So I can confirm that the valuation for our subject property is accurate. From page 21 till page 36, we have the aerial photographs, street views, and map for the rent comparables. And going ahead from page 37 to page 47, we have the photographs of our land comparable showing the street view, the aerial photographs, and the map photographs for our land comparables. So to conclude, I would ask the board to maintain the 2025 assessment value of $1,425,000.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, any questions?
Yes, I do have some questions. So, valuation for the subject property. This is model driven, is it?
Yes.
Okay. And for operating parking lots, has the city's position not historically been to value them based on the income approach?
So we do a mass appraisal method in which we have both the valuations, income and land. Since the value driven from income approach wasn't supporting our system, so we had to switch it technically to land value. And therefore for the current 2025 assessment year, we valued them as using land approach.
And is that an across the board or is that property by property?
I should say it depends on both property to property, but majorly for our vacant commercial loads like the parking loads, it's valued at land itself.
Okay. The subject property itself is an operating parking lot though, correct?
Yes.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sinclair, any questions?
Just one question, Mr. Chair, for some clarification. You referenced your land sales on page 20.
Yes.
Yes, and I just missed which one you said was your best comparable for the subject property.
So the best comparable for the subject property would be comparable number 4, 330 Donald Street, which has a land size of 18,173 square feet.
All right, I thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchins, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ratton, good afternoon. I'm gonna go to page 20 also, please. Land comparables. And first of all, ask you, where is the subject property located, please?
So the subject property is located at the intersection of St. Mary and Gary Street.
St. Mary's at Gary, okay. And, excuse me. So we're between Portage and Broadway, or I guess Portage and Broadway, I guess. Is that correct? Or closer to Graham Avenue, I guess?
Yes.
St. Mary's? Okay, got it. All right, and Gary Street, so we're on the east side of downtown there, just west of Main. And comparable, Ms. You were just asked the question, which was your best comparable, the 330 Donald Street. How far is that away? Sorry, I kind of lost track of where those comparables were located when you were going through them. How close is that one?
I actually don't have it written down somewhere, but $330 should be at approximately 5 to 10 minutes drive time from that to the maximum.
I'm sorry, that would be on page.
I actually don't have it written in my evidence somewhere.
Okay.
But if we go to, but yes, if you go to page 43 in my evidence,
Okay.
I have a Google map
Okay.
showing subject property.
Okay, if you don't mind, I gotta scroll down here. If you don't mind waiting, I'm gonna get down to page 43, please. And that would be a master plan of the subject and the comparables. Is that what I'm looking for?
Sorry, I didn't get it.
Sorry, that would be a master plan or site map of the comparables and the subject property. Is that right?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm still scrolling here. There's so many pages. Okay, here we go. Okay. I'm still looking for Donald Street here. There we are, Donald. The library. So where would the 330, where would that comparable be?
It's a red dot on the map. So just at the north of the bordage.
Oh, so just off of Ellis Avenue, Ellison and Donald. Okay, got it. Okay. Okay. Going back to page 20, the comparables. I have a question on the zoning on, sorry, I'm gonna have to get back there. Okay, page 20. The zoning on your land descriptions on page 20, the zoning on 124 Bannatyne, it's D. Can you tell me what that is?
Unfortunately, I don't know about the abbreviations, the complete full form, so it's on.
Okay. That would be in the exchange, I guess, east of Maine. Okay. And you're saying the best comparable, in your opinion, is
It's comparable for.
number 4?
Yes.
Comp number 4? Okay. Because of the similar size, pardon me. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Hutchings, it's due to the size and the shape of the lot.
Okay.
So it has a similar shape and yes, the size is a bit bigger than the subject property.
Okay,
But that would be the best comparable that I can conclude from my table.
okay, and to confirm, you're assessing this land at $117.50 per square foot approximately?
Yes, Mr. Hutchins.
Okay, and the comp that you're referring to is $132, okay. All right. That's all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I know it's mute now, that you're, I've got a question. I know it's mute now that you're using land value rather than income approach. But you did indicate in your work that there's 36 stalls. And the applicant I looked at, and he's indicated there's 41 stalls. Do you know why there's a discrepancy there?
So for the store count in our brief, it's based on the data that we have in our systems. So we originally, when this property was set up in our system, we went with the 36 number of store count. So that's what we went through.
Okay, the way you're valuing it doesn't really matter, I guess. In proximity, would you agree that your comparable number 3 would be closer to the subject property?
And I'm guessing we are referring to the land comparable right now.
I know it's a much smaller lot, and the sale price is almost the same per square foot, so it really doesn't much matter. And but it does show the area. And where's 240 St. Mary Avenue?
240 St. Mary's Avenue. Okay. So if we go to page number 45.
Okay.
I have a Google map picture showing a red dot. That represents comparable number 5240 St. Mary's. It's on intersections of. Yeah, so it's at the intersection of Gary and St. Mary Street.
Okay, so it's very close.
Yes,
Subject.
yes, Mr. Diamond.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's my questions. Mr. Smith, you can proceed with your evidence.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to clear up the location of the property for everybody. It is on the west side of Gary, mid-block between York and St. Mary. So if you're on St. Mary Avenue, 260 St. Mary is the office building that this is associated with. And on the north side of St. Mary would be the City of Winnipeg Police Building, essentially. So this is located to the south of 260 St. Mary mid-block. If you look at my page 5, you can see where the site is. And the location is shown on my page number 6, with the red dot indicating the exact location of the lot. So immediately to the south of the lot would be the Manitoba Hydro substation. If you look at the cover page of my report, you can see, well, the lot itself, of course, and the substation on the left-hand side of the photo there. So that is the property that we're looking at. It is gravel surfaced, electrified parking lot. And we are looking at a total of 41 stalls. Now, I will note, and I think this is critical to the valuation of the property. It is the parking lot for the 260 St. Mary office building. It's owned by the same owners. And it's encumbered by leases in the 260 St. Mary property, whereby the tenants have long-term leases on the parking at set rates for the term of their leases within the office building. And indeed, in order to lease the office building, they need to have parking available. So the parking goes hand in hand legally with the 260 St. Mary. It would not be a development site of its own. If the owner were to sell off the parking, they'd essentially be shooting themselves in the foot as far as being able to lease their office building at 260 St. Mary. So it simply wouldn't happen in that fashion. So what we have is an operating surface parking lot encumbered by leases. So it has always been valued that way by the city of Winnipeg in the past. This is the first time I've seen that changed, where it's been valued based on a land value approach. So that should be kept in mind. So let's move forward to the valuation of the property itself. So what we've done, if you look at my page 8, is look at the city of Winnipeg's assessment department's valuation parameters for parking lots. And we've gone to the high end of the range in our valuation to determine the fair market value for the subject. So if you look at the bottom of my page 8 and the paragraph there, you can see that City of Winnipeg's monthly rental rate range for this particular area, the inner downtown area, ranged between a low of $56 and $104 per stall at the top end in their guide, Valuation of Income Producing Properties 2025 General Assessment, which I've included in the addenda for the panel members to look at. So subject property is gravel surfaced. It is accessed off of the back lane, not via the Gary Street, and I believe they are electrified there. In any case, we've gone to the very top end of the range at $104 per stall per month in our valuation. Now, this is intended to be a net figure with no deduction taken from that. So 41 stalls times $104 per stall per month times 12 months gives you the projected revenue of $51,168. Then we move on to capitalization rate for that. Again, from the City of Winnipeg document, it is stated range for office properties, not specifically for parking lots. There was no distinction made there, but the range for office buildings, or rather office properties, was 3.4% to a high of 10.15%. This encompasses parking lots within it. So 20th to 80th percentiles being 5.6 to 7.25%. In past cycles, we had seen 5% being applied to parking lots. We have dipped below that and applied a cap rate of 4.5% to our projected revenue. So at the high end of the range, again, the city's model would produce a value of $1,137,000 rounded based on the top net rental revenue and a cap rate of 4.5%. Now, I have no way of determining whether the city has a lower cap rate than that for parking lots. I'm not really sure, but we believe that that would be appropriate for the subject. So our valuation, as shown, based again on the top end of the range using the City of Winnipeg's model, would be $1,137,000. And again, it's critical to note that the parking lot that we're discussing is encumbered by long-term parking leases from tenants at 260 St. Mary, which is owned by the same owners as the parking lot that we're discussing today. And then again, in the addenda, I've included that City of Winnipeg Assessment Department document that backs up the figures that I have utilized in determining the value for the property. That is my presentation, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Cuffer, any questions?
I'll start with just one question and then I'll hand it over to Mr. Rattan. Mr. Smith, I've worked downtown for a long time. I've never been offered a parking stall as part of my employment. Are downtown office buildings required legally to provide parking for their tenants?
It's not that it's a legal requirement, it's that if you are unable to provide that parking in close proximity, it makes your office property less attractive on the marketplace for leasing.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions.
Ms. Sinclair, any questions?
Yeah, just a couple. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Smith. I'm just wondering on your brief, you have a picture of this parking lot.
Yes.
Is that something that you took yourself?
So that photo itself is not one that I have taken, but I can tell you that I parked in this parking lot for roughly 8 years. And indeed scraped the side of my van, rounding the very tight pathway just in front of that fence there. So I'm quite familiar with this one.
All right, thank you. And I'm just wondering, do you have any knowledge as to how long this has been a parking lot for?
I don't specifically have that knowledge, so I don't want to speculate, but again, I can tell you that it was a parking lot prior to the time frame that I worked for my former company when we were housed at 260 St. Mary, and that began in 2012. So it would have been a parking lot before that time frame as well, because the prior owners sold the parking lot as well as the office building at that time. So it was a parking lot prior to that time frame. I could speculate, but I don't have an exact figure.
All right, I thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Smith, is this casual parking allowed on this lot?
There is casual parking allowed, yes.
24 hours a day?
Not 24 hours a day, no. Only outside of the regular office hours when the stalls are assigned specifically to the tenants.
Okay, and could I ask you what 260 St. Mary's Road is? St. Mary's Avenue, pardon me?
Yes, it's a 3-story office building.
And who's located in there?
There's a number of different tenancies that are located in there. It's not a single occupant, it's multiple tenant.
Okay, so it's 3 stories, all right. And all those, so you're stating that all the spaces available in that lot between, let's say, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. ballpark are reserved for tenant parking from 260 St. Mary's Avenue?
That is the indication that I have, yes.
Okay, all right. And in your opinion, if the property is best valued at the income approach as opposed to the assessor at the highest and best use as land value?
I think it would have to be valued on the income approach based on, again, the encumbrance of the parking to the office building itself. They go hand in hand. They're
Okay.
not separable.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Excuse me a minute, Mr. Smith. There's something I do want to check on. I'm just looking, Mr. Smith, at the statement that was provided by, I guess, the management company that, according to the disclosure required. And I'm trying to find where it is right now because I was looking at it earlier. I made a note to myself that it showed an NOI for the parking of 102,235.76 a year. I'm trying to find it now, but if you actually even use a 5% cap rate on that, that would give you a value of over $2 million. Why would you propose when you evaluate this?
Well, two reasons. First of all, there's more than just this parking lot that has parking on it. 260 St. Mary itself has parking at the rear of the site. I'm not sure if you can see that in the aerial that I had. In fact, you can. On my page 5, if you look at the top of that aerial, the parking behind that northernmost building or topmost building there is encompassed in that number, as well as the building in between. The parking behind that is also included in that figure. Beyond that, again, we're looking at equity, right? So we've assigned the very top end of the city of Winnipeg's valuation model, and that should essentially be what the top market value for the property would be based on the city of Winnipeg's modeling.
Yeah, but it shows, and I'm saying the actual show a much higher income than the city's modeling shows.
Yeah, and as I indicated, that takes into account the 2 additional parking areas that I've just described to you. So that figure would be higher than it would specifically be for just the subject itself.
Okay, why don't you use actuals though, when they're available to evaluate this?
I'm sorry?
Why did you use actuals when you evaluated this?
Well, so I just spoke to that, I believe, with regard to the issue of equity. So if we have a standard means of modeling these properties, and you have a top end of how those properties are going to be modeled, that should essentially be the methodology that's used to value the properties. So as I said, the figures that you're looking at include additional parking. There's no easy way to separate that out, and it would be somewhat speculative. So we've gone to the very top end of the city of Winnipeg's modeling in order to determine the market value. We're not looking for a low value here or anything of that nature. We've gone to the top end.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question arising, please.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Hutchings.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith, on page 1 of your brief, I'm looking at the picture there, and you made a comment that it was reserved during, we'll call them working hours. I noticed sign there, park all day, $11. Does that not imply that there's parking available during the day on a cab?
I can't speak to the practices of the parking management. They don't have additional parking outside of the tenants, to my knowledge. It had been indicated that the parking is fully leased to the tenancies of the property. So a photo of that, I really can't speak to that, I'm afraid, Mr. Hutchings. That might be from a different year. I'm just not sure. Really, what I'm indicating is the layout of the property.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchings. Okay, so we've completed our evidence on this matter, so we'll close hearing on it and go on to item number 3, being the property at 246 Beverly Street. And Mr. Kupfer, when you're ready, you can present your evidence.
So I would like to seek a non-compliance on this on the subject property. Although my evidence doesn't point this out, but upon reviewing this evidence, I found that the income and expense mailer was consolidated for three different roll numbers. Which was difficult for us to differentiate for the subject property, so we didn't have any income and expense mailer for my subject property to be sent.
Okay.
This can be pointed out on page 8 of my evidence on the right side. Data consolidated for the following roll numbers.
Okay, did you make a request for a separate disclosure on each of those roll numbers?
Sorry,
Did you make a request for a separate disclosure on each one of those roll numbers?
yes, we send individual request forms for income for filling out the income and expense mailers.
Okay, and if you were doing that, why wouldn't you present them the letters that were sent out to?
So the letters that were sent out. Sorry,
Well, you're requesting, I guess, a long cooperation at this point, and can you then show us the letters that were sent out?
yes,
Requesting-
so if you go ahead on page 11.
Okay,
It shows that our original letters were sent on April 30th of 2023.
okay,
Then we have so yeah, from page number 13 till page number 16, we have all the information. Not 16, even till page 20, we show that we have sent them the income and expense mailer to be filled out for the specific subject property.
okay,
And what we got in return was consolidated income and expense mirror for three different subject properties, for three different properties.
okay. Mr. Smith, do you have anything to say at this point regarding the application of the city for non-cooperation?
I do. The main one is, this is the first I've heard of this. So I don't believe that, you can request non-cooperation, simply at the time of hearing. We don't have any means of, preparing for, this particular issue. It's not raised in advance. And, again, as I note, this is the first I've heard of it. It's not noted in the report. And I would indicate to you with regard to the income and expense form, as with many properties, and this has been brought to the board's attention many times in the past on this and other properties. I believe it's not. There is no separating the parking for the three properties that we're looking at. They're operated as a unit. They don't separately meter or snow clear one from another, etc. There's no accurate means of specifically doing that division to meet with the city of Winnipeg's request. And to my knowledge, this has been pointed out to the board on this and other properties in the past and agreed with. So those would be my points. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchings. Any questions of either the assessment department or Mr. Smith?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. To the assessment department, is there an income and expense statement completed that we can look at for a summary of all three? And if you could tell me if it's there, is it on, what page is it on?
No, we don't have that in our evidence.
You don't have any evidence? Oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So you just have your blank letters showing that they were sent out for each individual properties.
Yes,
Okay.
and just return we got so basically for this specific subject property, what we got was the letters from page number 8 till page number 10, showing that they are all consolidated instead of having the information So why we request the individual income and expense mailer is to know what kind of expenses and income were generated from the specific subject property. Because that information will be used by our model to generate our capitalization rates or property valuations, I should say.
Okay, and you haven't included proof of delivery with the non-compliance?
The only information that I could get out of our systems was that we didn't have. I wasn't able to find out the delivery notices for the subject property.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all my
Yeah.
questions.
Ms. Linklater, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, Mr. Cuffer, I noticed on this property, you're evaluating the property on the basis of comparative sales, not income. So how is the city being prejudiced by having all of the income shown on one statement where you're not really using income to evaluate the property?
Since it's a mass appraisal system, so we would, for this subject property, yes, we are not valuing it on income approach, we are evaluating it using land approach. But again, it's a mass appraisal system, so we would need that information for generating better results. If all the properties in the city of Winnipeg start not filling out this information, our model won't be successful and we won't be able to come up with the valuations. So that's why we would need the income and expenses specifically to the specifically needed for our income and expense mailers.
Okay, well, I think that I have no further questions to ask, so we're going to go into camera and we'll determine whether we'll grant your application or not. So we're going to ask that both of you leave the hearing room. Thank you. Okay, I can indicate that we have deliberated and we find that we're not going to comment on it, but it's unusual that an application of this nature is not pre-stated. And this was just stated. Now, we're not making a decision on that basis, but I'm just saying it's unusual. Secondly, though, there's no evidence. We have no evidence of what exactly was submitted. So we're not able to determine whether the city would be able to pull out from that the information for the various properties that it's indicated were put together. We also don't have evidence that any of the letters that the city sent on all three applications were in fact delivered and received, which is usual for the granting of this type of an application. And quite frankly, because not that matters either, but it won't, not receiving it does not prejudice the city insofar as the valuation of this property is concerned, using the sales approach rather than income approach. So on that basis, we're not granting the application, Mr. Cuffer, and so you can proceed with the rest of your evidence.
File number 24-4022. Roll number 130-322-36500. Property address 246 Beverly Street. Owner National Developments Limited. 2025 assessment year valued at $591,000 using April 1 of 2023 as a reference date. This the assessment value was derived using land approach. The land area is 19,438 square feet for the subject property. On page 2, I have some pictures of the subject property. Page 3 has an aerial photograph showing the area of the subject property. There is no, on page 4, there is no sale history for the subject property, meaning there was no sale. On page 4, we have some rent comparables that I pointed out for the subject property, though the property is valued using land approach. I would like to bring it to your attention that comparable number second is the best comparable to compare it to our subject property, and comparable number 4. So these are the two comparables that are very close, likely are similar to our subject property, and I would say these are the best comparables in order to compare them using income approach. Moving forward to page 7, we have some land sale comparables. on our sale comparables, I would say comparable number 3 is the best comparable. Has it has 13,000 square feet of the land size, whereas our subject property has 19,438. But the comparable is valued at $73 per square feet, whereas our subject property is only $30.40 square feet. So that would be the best comparable for my land sales. Going forward from page 8 to page 19, page 20 is all the income and expense information that we received, that we kind of received from the property owner, and the income and expense were sent by City of Winnipeg. Page 21 to page 32 have the photographs of rent comparables showing an aerial view, street view, and a map. And page 33 to 46 have the photographs of land comparables showing an aerial view, street view, and maps of our land comparables. So to conclude, I would say we would ask the board to confirm the 2025 assessment value of $591,000.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Smith?
Yes, just quickly, so this was, the valuation was model driven for the subject property.
Yes.
And the land sale comparables that you have on page 7, I see that for the most part, well, not entirely, I guess, many of these are, how would I term this, in the more traditional downtown area, so in the central core versus where the subject is located. That fair to say?
Yes, Mr. Smith.
Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, any questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Ms. Linklater, any questions?
I also have no questions. Thank you.
Just a clarification, Mr. Cuffer, I'm looking at the map that you showed and the location. It looks like this property is a parking lot for what buildings on Portage Avenue at Beverly Street?
Yes, this is right up the turnoff if you're taking Broadway towards Portage. Right as you're hopping onto Portage there, this parking lot will be located just beyond the one office building there down Beverly. So it's just outside of our downtown core, we would call it.
Yeah. Okay, that's on page 3. Okay, that's my only question. Thank you. Mr. Smith, you can proceed with your evidence.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So as just discussed, 246 Beverly is one of the parking areas for the property located at 835 Portage, that being the office, multi-tenant office building there. The parking is leased out to the tenants of the office building, exactly the same as the property that we were just dealing with. It's encumbered by leases to those tenancies over the term of their lease in the office building. It's owned by the same owner as the office building itself, and they do need to be able to provide that parking in order to tenant, to lease up their building. So let's look at the subject itself. My page number, the cover page gives you a photo of the property during the daytime at one particular point. You can see that it is concrete surfaced, no access from Beverly. The access is via the back lane. And further details shown on page 3, site area of 19,438 square feet, and we have a total of 64 stalls for this particular this particular property. The site itself is shown on page number 5. And location, which is important here, is shown on page number 6 with the red dot indicating where it is. So as Mr. Cooper had indicated, it's on the north side of Portage Avenue, just off of Beverly, roughly at the intersection of Broadway with Portage Avenue there. So if you looked at my site description on page 5, the aerial just to the south and west of that is where the office building associated with this parking lot is located. So let's move into the valuation itself. Looking at the subject property, again, it is, sorry, just getting my bearings here. Looking at the bottom of page number 8, so we have a monthly parking charge of $60 to $70 per stall per month on a gross basis, built into the leasing for the office property, with 59 stalls being assigned out of a total of 64 stalls to the tenants of 829 Portage Avenue. So just looking at that, the monthly parking rates do obviously vary throughout the city. We're in a very peripheral location to the downtown here, so obviously rates are somewhat lower. If we look at the city of Winnipeg's assessment department valuation parameters, they have a monthly rental rate range for this particular area, which is considered the outer downtown area, of $31.50 to $58.50 net per stall per month, according to their valuation of income producing properties model. That being net of all vacancy and expenses. So subject property is restricted access, it is electrified, it is paved, and they do charge $60 to $70 per stall per month gross. Location is obviously critical to this. You can only charge what the market will bear. That's what they're able to achieve at this particular location. So if we look at my page number 9, we run through the income. 38 stalls at $60 a month, 21 at $70, and then we've assigned the 5 stalls that aren't specifically tenanted at the upper end of that range at $70 per stall. That gives us a total gross parking revenue of $49,200. Didn't apply any vacancy to that. Subject property was 7% vacancy, had 7% vacancy as of the valuation date. Moving down the page, we have the actual operating expenses. As I'd indicated, they do have 3 separate roll numbers with parking on them that are not accounted for individually. They obviously collect the revenue, and the expenses are assigned kind of as a bulk for all. They're not divided. So our methodology in determining what these expenses would be in order to reduce the gross figure to a net figure is to take the proportionate share. So we have a total of 153 stalls. And this subject property forms 64 out of those. So for a proportionate share of 41.8%. I've given you the operating expenses specific to the parking for this. We assign the correct proportionate share. That gives you just under $17,000 in operating expenses, plus the property tax, which wasn't included in that, of $13,981. So your total operating expenses would come to $30,949. on that basis. Deducting that figure from the net operating income, or rather from the gross parking revenue of 49,200 gives us our NOI of $18,251. So skipping forward to page number 10, we have the same information with regard to capitalization rates as mentioned in the prior property that we were just dealing with. If we look at the location of this property and demand for parking in that area, it would be somewhat lower than, say, 170 Gary located directly downtown that we were discussing. So we've increased the capitalization rate by a half point to 5%, still very much toward the lower end for cap rates for properties of this type. And using the 5% cap rate, we come to a final market value of $392,000. And if you look at the addenda materials, they include the revenue that we were discussing, as well as the operating expenses as submitted to the city. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tucker, any questions?
Yes, I do. As per page 9, Mr. Smith, we have an expense for asphalt and paving. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
You referred to $16,000. Is this expense being done every year, or this would be done specifically? I should say it as like in 5 years, we are doing it once. Is this a repetitive expense?
Well, it's an expense that occurs on in intervals, right? Yes, there's probably some that's done every year. If you look at the photos, which we did take, they haven't repaved the lot for $16,000. They've made repairs to the lot for $16,000. So it is an expense that does reoccur. Whether it's $16,000 per year, that obviously will have some variability to it.
So we can say that it's kind of a capital expenditure, no.
No, as I indicated, it's an ongoing expense that is repair related and not a capital expenditure.
That should be. No further questions.
Mr. Hutchings, any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. To follow up on that question from the assessor, Mr. Smith, that asphalt paving contributes to what, 40 some percent of the expenses? Would you not treat that as partially a capital expense? When it's taken the expenses for 1 year?
No, I wouldn't, in that, if it were a one-time thing, certainly, we might look at it in that frame, or if they were repaving, if the entire lot required repaving or re-electrifying or something of that nature, then that would be a different matter. But as you can see, that's not what occurred here. $16,000 of paving and repair and painting is not actually that much in the grand scheme of things. And if you have gotten a quote for repaving your driveway recently, you'll understand that these costs, as with many construction costs, have gone up quite dramatically.
I guess the second question is that paving for all 3 lots, or is that assigned to one particular lot?
I wouldn't be able to break that down for you specifically, but it's for the paving or repair and asphalting of the lots that are associated with the office building that the parking facilities are attached with. So whether it's this one or the adjacent one, it's divided amongst the 3 of them. We're not assigning $16,000 specifically to this lot. We're just taking the proportionate share, obviously.
Yeah, okay. Okay. All right, no other questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lindblad, are any questions?
I have none at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So, Mr. Smith, on the last one we did at 170 Gary, I asked you why you didn't use actuals there, and you said it's because you had three lots on one statement. It was hard to pull them apart, and so you basically used certain parameters that you said the city had provided and came up with a valuation that way instead of using the actuals. And this one, you're using actuals, even though you have three lots mixed together. So I'm just wondering why you're using a different approach on this one when you have the same situation as you had at 170 Gary Street.
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that question. I anticipated that it would be coming at some point, so here we are. What the difference is, obviously, is location and demand for parking. So when we look at the 170 Gary, it is downtown, and there is more demand for that parking, driving greater rental rates, etc., as we've used in our model. Now, what we're looking for with regard to assessment and market value is fairness and equity as well, right? So we're looking at how these are best assessed and where the subject properties would fall within that. So what we did with 170 Gary was put it at the very upper end of the city of Winnipeg's range using their parameters. The subject property, there's really no demand outside of the office building itself for this lot with regard to parking. Therefore, the parking rates are considerably lower, and they're also considerably lower than what the city of Winnipeg's model is showing. So it would not be equitable to assign a $58.50 per square foot net per stall per month rental rate to the 64 stalls here, because we'd be considerably overstating the income that they would be able to generate for the property. So location has a very significant amount to do with market value, obviously, and that is why we have chosen this methodology for this particular property.
Okay, so Mr. Smith, you feel you've just answered my question then?
I believe I have, yes.
Okay, if that's your answer, I'll let you be the judge of that. Okay, I don't think I have any further questions. Thank you very much. Any summation required by any parties in this matter?
No, thank you.
No, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Okay, Mr. Smith, thank you very much for your presence and your evidence and your hearing from us.
Okay, thank you for your time, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Next time, yeah.
Okay, we can then move on to item number 6, which is the property 170 Fort. And we have a new applicant there to swear in.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm going to admit Mr. McCoubry now.
Thank you.
Mr. McCoubry, can you hear us?
I can indeed, yes.
Thank you. Mr. McCoubry, I will swear you in now. Would
Okay.
you please state your full name?
Oh, I'm sorry, just bear with me. I'm on my wife's computer today and I'm a little less familiar with it.
Okay,
So pardon me for 1 second here. Oh, there we are. Yes. Art McCoubry.
thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCoubry. Welcome. Our first property that we're dealing with of your matters is 170 Fort Street. And Mr. Kupfer, you can proceed with your evidence this time.
File number 24-227, roll number 12097558100, property address 174th Street, owner Harvick Investments Inc. 2025 assessment value as $1,424,000 with a reference date of 1st April 2023. This valuation came using land approach. The land area for the subject property is 12,108 square feet. Our recommendation is to maintain the 2025 assessment value. Moving on to the page 2 and 3, we have some photographs of our subject property. The subject property is square in shape and is located at the intersection of 4th Street and St. Mary, accessible from 4th Street. Page 3 has an aerial photograph showing the land area. Page 4 has some parking rent comparables. This property is valued using land approach, but I still thought it would be better to indicate rent comparables. Page 5 and page 6 show the study of the capitalization rate. Since we are valuing this property at land approach, we can ignore the cap rates for now. Moving over to the page 7, I have land comparable sales. I have 6 comparables. The best comparable for my subject property would be comparable number 3, which is 175 Donald Street. I'm sorry, it would be, the best comparable would be comparable number 4 with the 18,000 square feet area, which is with a sale price of $132 square feet. The subject property has a 12,108 square feet, which was valued at $117.61. So from that, we can indicate that the subject property was valued accurately. Page 8 and page 9 represent the income and expense mailer that was filled out and sent back to the city of Winnipeg. Pages 10 to 19 represent the photographs of rent comparables. And pages 20 to 31 have the photographs of land comparable sales. To conclude, I would recommend to maintain the 2025 assessment value for the subject property, $1,424,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. McCoubrey?
I do, please. Firstly, I just want to go back to not using the income approach to value. This is an income property. It's a
You're asking questions now, Mr. McCoubrey. You can argue later, but if you have a question, go ahead and ask it.
Yeah, I am asking why he didn't do an income approach when it's an income producing property.
So we didn't use the income approach since the value of the subject property comes from our mass appraisal model. So we use both the approaches, the direct comparison and the income approach. The value produced using income approach wasn't supporting the subject property. So our model switched the value to switch the methodology of valuation to land. So that's why we valued the subject property at land value.
Would you concede that a prospective purchaser would base his purchasing decisions on the property's income generating ability?
Not necessarily.
And the other thing I just wanted to ask you about I think it's on page 4 of your brief where you have your parking rent comparables.
Yes.
And the first one you show is the subject property 174th Street with stabilized NOI of 17.71.
So firstly, I would like to mention that the parking rent comparable table shouldn't have my subject property into when I'm comparing the other rent comparables. And it seems like there is a glitch where the information wasn't entered properly at here.
Well, fine. I can get back to that on my presentation. I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sinclair, any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just one question. Mr. Rattan, I'm looking at the photo you have of the subject property. Sorry, page 2.
Yes.
This is an in-park property.
Yes, Ms. Linklater.
Okay, I thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, any questions?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rattan, on page, sorry, subject history I'm looking for here. I guess there was an older sale showing back in 2009 of $510,000. Would that be accurate? It's a long time ago, but it does establish some value back then, I guess. Would you consider that to be an arm's length sale? Maybe perhaps I'll ask the applicant, pardon me, but any information, or you never looked at it at all?
I never looked into it.
Okay, thank you. And so we have this recurring theme about you looking at two approaches to value, income approach and then the comparison market approach. And you're making the decision on this property that the highest and best use is in the comparison land approach or
Yes,
comparison value. Okay. That's kind of a leading question, but it kind of gets to the point. All right. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. And I don't have any questions. So Mr. McClubber, you can proceed with your evidence.
Thank you. I think I just want to start by saying that surface parking lots are essentially a transitory use. Nobody expects a surface parking lot to remain so. And if you look at more vibrant cities in Winnipeg, like a Toronto or a Calgary, the surface parking lots are pretty much completely consumed for redevelopment. And I would contrast that with the subject property, which has been a surface parking lot for decades. And I would expect if anybody had any interest in redeveloping this site, they would have expressed it. A surface parking lot is essentially for sale. The developer just drives down a street, and if he sees a surface parking lot, he knows it's available for development. The subject property is an interior lot on a real low traffic street with real poor appeal. And it's got a terrible income history. It's an income producing property. It's a commercial parking lot. And the city of Winnipeg has chosen not to look at the income approach for the simple reason that it can't support a value of, my analysis shows a value of $270,000 based on its income. And if you look at the presentation that I prepared, and I hope everybody reads it closely, because I think there's some really good information in there as to how badly surface parking lots have fared since COVID. In the analysis which we prepared at BWF, we concluded a time adjustment of 35% minimum since COVID. And that's borne out by the drop in income on surface parking lots. So if you look at the comparable sales that the assessor has used, all of them are pre-COVID. To me, they're not even relevant. What a parking lot was worth before the pandemic doesn't reflect what it's worth now. And notwithstanding that, the comparables are terrible. If you look at the comparable sales that we used in our appraisal, they're much more relevant. And the one that the assessor says is his best comparable sale is situate on a prominent signaled intersection at the corner of Ellis and Donald. It has no relevance to our, we're like on a deserted street block, and this is a prominent intersection, a block from Canada One Center and a block from Burton Cummings Arena. It is so far superior to our property. We didn't even present it because it's not even relevant. So I think that the absence of an income approach is telling, and comparing the subject property to properties that are in no way similar. The Pioneer Avenue, these are terrible comparable sales, and you cannot draw reasonable conclusions from them. And I don't know why those comparable sales were chosen, but they get the whole analysis off in the wrong direction. And I do want to go back to page 4 on the assessors, where he has his parking rent comparables. And if we can all look at that graph, the first property shown on there is 170 Fort Street. And if we look at how much income it's producing per stall per month, in the assessor's own brief, it shows is $17.71 per stall per month. That is a sixth, a seventh of some of these other parking lots. And it just goes to, illustrate just what a terrible property this is. And it's not a question of bad management. It's professionally managed by Impark. And if you can refer to my document, and if we can go to the income approach on my presentation, and we see, now mine might be numbered a little different than yours because yours might have PDF numbers, but if I can bring you straight to the income approach to value, and on page 14, the numbering on my document, and that might be slightly at odds with your PDF numbering, but number 14 on my document. And if we're all there, you can see now I was provided with formal operating and statements from Impark and from the property owner. So the income that this property is generating is roughly about $20,000 a year. And if we were going to establish or capitalize it at a normal commercial capitalization rate, which in my instance, I used roughly 7.5%. The capitalized value of this property as investment real estate is only $270,000. And in my mind, these dollars are indisputable. This is exactly what happened. These aren't projections. These are actual audited statements. This is what it earned, and the assessed value of $1.4 million. Nobody's buying a property for $1.4 million that generates $20,000 a year. They're buying $270,000.
Excuse me, Mr. McCoubry, would you mind when you're referring to what you're talking about, what page you're on so that we can follow you?
It's I'm referencing a document that might be page number slightly different than you. So
Okay,
if you look at the bottom of your page, there may be 2 page numbers depending on how the PDF was printed, but it's page number 14.
Mr.
14.
McCovery, I can tell you that we're getting it in the same numbers that you've got it numbered at.
Okay, because I'm sorry, but I don't know where you're referring to when you're talking. So
Okay, page 14.
Okay, thank you.
So if you look at that and you look at the net operating at 20,361, I can see why the city didn't use an income approach, because when you look at that and you look at pretty typical commercial cap rates, they suggest the property as an investment property is worth about $270,000 as compared to the $1.4 million that it's assessed at. So it's completely at odds. So if the city, if I can put words in their mouth a little bit, decided that doesn't work, and it doesn't, it's not a viable parking lot, then you have to look at what is it worth as a development site. It's extremely unappealing as a development site. And the comparable sales which they have used are good development sites. East Exchange District, a prominent signaled intersection close to Canada One Center. Those are really good development sites by Winnipeg standards. Nobody's developed them yet, but there's a chance that they could be developed. Our lot, you can look at the pictures, but our lot, if you're familiar with Fort Street, it is real low intensity commercial uses, even industrial uses. You'll find a little locksmith building, it's a very poor block and a very poor street, and it has very low parking usage. The owners would love to do something better with it, but like a lot of properties in downtown Winnipeg, you could put a $3 million building on it and it would be worth $2 million when you're done because of the poor locational characteristics. So I think the assessment is egregiously wrong. I actually differ in opinion from it so much that when I presented ours and did the income approach and the market approach, I almost kind of threw them a bone, if you will, and agreed with the market approach. And that is almost a concession that in respect, you could argue that nobody's buying this site as a development site. So it's almost a false narrative that this is what it's worth as a development site, because you could put it's essentially been for sale for decades. If somebody wanted it as a development site, all they got to do is offer. And as I was saying, it's a transitory use of parking lot. And when developers see a surface parking lot, that's a for sale sign. And nobody's offered to buy it or do anything with it. So I just in closing, I hope the panel, I know you guys are busy, but I hope you take the time to read the arguments that are presented in written form, far better than I can present in a narrative. And I think it's just the assessment is, I want to use the word outrageously high. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cuffer. Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Diamond, thank you. Turning first to my page 7, I believe you made a comment that all of the land sales that the city was using were after or prior to COVID-19, so they weren't applicable. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe one of them occurred post-COVID, but the implications of COVID weren't clearly understood at that time. So there is a little bit of a lapse between when COVID arrived and when the market dealt with it. So one of your sales, and I think it was comparable, I got it right in front of me, comparable number 4 transacted in August 2021. That's the one on the busy intersection. So COVID had been around for about a year, but the implications of just how severely it was going to hurt office revenues and parking lot revenues weren't clearly understood at that time.
I believe my colleague identified comparable number 3 and comparable number 4 as our best comparables for the subject property. And both of these contain M zoning as multi-use. I'm looking at your relevant land sales on your page 10. Do any of them share the same zoning as the subject property?
I'm sorry, you just cut out. Did you say the same zoning as the subject property?
That's correct. Your 3 applicable sales that you have identified, 10, 11, and 12.
Sorry, what page are you referring to?
Your page 10, sir.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. I see development sites. Okay. I've got them. Thank you. None of them have zoning. M zoning is particular to downtown Winnipeg, but that is a little bit of a misnomer. Like downtown in a lot of applications sounds superior to on the periphery of downtown, but in the instance of Winnipeg, that's not true. Some of these comparable sales, like 320 River Avenue, number 11, I think we're all familiar with Winnipeg, and to a developer, if you compare Fort Street to River Avenue in the most congested condominium area of Winnipeg, River Avenue is far, far superior. And River Avenue will attract a lot of attention from developers. And Fort Street, my block or our block of Fort Street, will attract none.
Your comparable number 10 under development potential lists equal location. This is 956 Notre Dame Avenue, correct?
Correct.
You believe 956 Notre Dame Avenue is a relatively similar development potential to being located between Fort and Gary downtown?
I do. I think it would be slightly superior because of its proximity to the Health Science Center, but they have a lot of the similar characteristics. Low economic strata, high incidence of crime, low redevelopment pressure. So they do share a lot of the same problems. I would suggest 956 Notre Dame's probably got a better chance of attracting multifamily housing. Nobody seems interested in building on a site like that in the downtown for new housing.
To summarize, then, your three most relevant land sales are not located in the downtown, similar to what the subject property is.
Yeah.
And you're stating they all have equal or better locations, and none of them share the same zoning.
Right, none of them share the same zoning, and as far as better locations, I want to reiterate, if you look at number 11 and 12, Sherbrooke is in a little commercial corridor that's being completely redeveloped. It's far superior to our location. The one on River Avenue is barely relevant. It is so far superior. It's only the one on Notre Dame Avenue, which is in any way relatable to our property. And the zoning, is a little bit of a red herring, if you will, in that, anybody developing these properties are probably going to look at multifamily housing or mixed use housing. Nobody's building office buildings in the downtown, outside of the Shed District, True North Center and those sorts of things, but nobody's doing small scale office buildings, and nobody has for a long time. So I think were the subject to be redeveloped, it would be redeveloped with a mixed use building, which would have commercial on the main floor and maybe 2 or 3 floors of suites.
Your page or your table above this, which includes items 5 to 9, looks like they are similarly located to our comparables list. In fact, they actually share 124 Bannatyne, I believe, in common. And these range from $94.96 to a high of $136.64. Is that correct?
That's correct, before time adjustments.
Do you believe that this is a
If I could
factor?
refer you to page 12, that would be the time adjusted rates that we derived from those.
Oh, you time adjusted them downwards by 30%?
Yeah, and I think if I can refer you and the panel indeed to the narrative on page 11, where we look at how gross incomes dropped. We had formal documents on 5 surface parking lots in the downtown, one of them a parkade, and we illustrated how much their gross sales dropped pre-COVID to post-COVID. And we've put the percentage in gross income on the right column. And you can see that, some of them were down 48%, 24%, 27%. So that's our justification for the large time adjustment. And it's not specific to Winnipeg. I mean, I think it's generally understood that downtown parking demand has dropped for a number of reasons, and those reasons are described in my filing, and I'm just going to give you a page number to have a quick look at. And perhaps that can explain it better than I can off the top of my head, but bear with me 1 minute. Yeah, if you could look at page 16, sir, and I think that is some of the rationale where we were looking for a reason why there was such a huge drop in parking revenues. And those 4 reasons seem to be the reason why. And with capitalization rates being stable, when your income drops 40%, your capitalized value drops 40%.
The comparables that we were discussing were land sale comparables, not derived using a parking value. So have you submitted any evidence that supports a 30% drop in land values, and what would that be based on?
No, I don't think land values have dropped 30%. I think specific to parking lots they have, but again, I don't think the land sales that were presented in the assessor's brief are relevant. They're just far too superior.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sinclair, any questions?
My question was asked and answered, actually. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question would be, are you the appraiser presenting this report?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are you representing an agent or otherwise, or a property owner?
I'm representing a property owner. It's actually a family that owns the properties. They're kind of spread out across Canada. And if I can give you just a quick background.
No, that's okay. That answers the question. Thank you.
Okay.
That's fine. Thank you. Okay. Any evidence or anything you can tell us about that 2009 purchase price? I assume it's the current owners.
Yeah, it was an arm's length sale.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And
Okay.
I know everybody on the panel knows this, but 2009 by comparison was a relative heyday for Winnipeg downtown compared to 15 years later where we are now.
Okay, my question is, in your opinion, have land values gone up since then in downtown?
Land values have gone up much, much higher, but not in downtown Winnipeg. I mean, there are prime areas of downtown Winnipeg that are still remaining largely undeveloped. There's office buildings in downtown Winnipeg, like 333 Gary Street, that have been for sale for 9 years without anybody buying them. The downtown market is terrible. So when we talk about how great the rest of the city has done, and it has, land values have went up nicely. Downtown Winnipeg, outside of True North Square, has seen none of that.
Okay, thank you. I guess what I would like you to do is state for the record what value you're asking us to change the assessment to.
Well, on my presentation, I came up with a value. If we were going to base it just on income, I would say 270,000, but I think as a development site, $565,000. And I believe that is fair and reasonable. Can't be supported by its income, but can be supported by comparable land sales.
Okay, so you're asking us to revise the assessment to $500,000.
$565,000.
565, okay. And that is based on the
That is,
compound sales on page We're looking at page 10, okay? And you're relying on the relevant land sales to come up with that value?
I am relying on the most appropriate land sales we were able to identify.
Okay, which are those?
Those are all in the package presented. I believe there was 12 of them. If I can
Right.
refer you to page,
10? I'm looking at them.
okay, yeah.
I'm asking you what you're basing your $565,000 on, which land sales? Or all of them?
Those ones, those on page 15 of the report.
Okay,
Okay, hold on, pardon me. Assessment appeal. The land sales are on page
10.
Yeah, 10. I think it's more relevant from my point of view to look at the land sales on page 12 after they've been adjusted for time.
Okay, page 12.
And if you look at the column of time adjusted dollars per square foot, and these are looking solely at parking lot sales, and that came up with $537,000.
Okay, where do you get the time adjustments? How do you analyze a time adjustment to reduce or increase a value?
If you look on page 11, I've done an analysis where we've looked at the drop in gross income on 5 parking lot operations in downtown Winnipeg, and we've looked at the drop in gross income, and knowing that capitalization rates have remained stable, we know that a 30% drop in income indicates a 30% drop in capitalized value. So there's been a huge drop in the performance of surface parking lots, and that is what justifies the large time adjustments.
Is there an adjustment? Is there any relevance to the interest rates increasing significantly?
It's hard to say cap rates. Conventional wisdom would suggest that cap rates should have went up when the interest rates up, but they were very sticky. So cap rates, even though if you look at what they're composed of and the different variables that affect them, you would think that they would have went up, but cap rates have been really stable right through the pandemic. Even though they really shouldn't have been.
Okay. So what does that, your $565,000 estimate of value, what does that come out per square foot from the land value?
That would be it'd be less than $50, but let me just give you the exact $41.30 on 500,000. 565 would be $46.67 a foot.
Okay. And I think my notes state that the 3 relevant ones that you presented on page 10 showed selling prices of $49, $80, and $52 a square foot. How do you reconcile going down to $46.67?
On page 10, which ones are you referring to again? Sorry.
The bottom 3 you said were your best comparables? Yes.
Yeah, I think that, if we can all just envision River Avenue and all the redevelopment pressure on River Avenue and what a beautiful enclave it is for multi-story construction. It's a great location. It's achieving $80 a foot. We're not even in that neighborhood.
Okay.
And even 198 Sherbrooke Street, if you think of that sort of neat little, almost accordion village vibe that they're developing there, and it's a really appealing redevelopment opportunity, that stretch of Sherbrooke, and it sold for $52. And in my mind, that's far superior to our site.
Okay, then if they're superior, why not go zero on less superior ones above the chart? If those are,
I'm sorry, what? I don't understand.
well, you're zeroing in on, you're saying, or you called them development potential, relevant land sales, and that you've gone to superior locations in those
Yeah.
three. Okay, so if we look at the other ones, are there no more up above that are closer in location, Bannatyne? I know you're saying, let's put it this way. Assessors and nobody can create sales. I believe as an appraiser, you're gonna look at the sales and then do adjustments to account for differences in the location and that kind of thing. Doesn't matter whether you're gonna do adjustments based on location, inferior, superior, et cetera, right?
Right.
So why, so when you make the statement that the assessor's sales are bad, they're not bad sales, they're what's available to you as an appraiser and to the assessor to use as market evidence. You do adjustments to them, right?
Well, yeah, but in fairness, the sales that I had, that I looked at, they could have used those ones.
Well, they didn't though.
Why are you choosing a comparable sale on a prominent signaled intersection 1 block from Canada Life Center? Like it's not relevant.
Well,
You
no,
know, you might as well use Portage in Maine.
it's relevant, it's just that adjustments have to be made to recognize that that's a superior location. As an appraiser, you would do that as,
Okay,
you
but
know,
what knowing the adjustments is it's more useful to bracket the property. Like here's one, that we know that sold for $40 that's worse. Here's one that sold for 80 that's better. And
I
you
guess-
bracket it.
I guess what I'm saying is, in an ideal world, you can go apples to apples, right? You would agree
Yeah.
with me. In this business of appraisal or the assessor doing evaluation, they can only go with the sales and do adjustments, just as you would.
Yeah, but they didn't adjust them with respect. They
Pardon me?
looked at that sale and they put our value, or if you will, the value of the property on Fort Street at $1.4 million. They're putting it the same value as a big site at a big signaled intersection that's, I don't know, is it twice as good as our site, twice as valuable? They're not adjusting theirs. That's the point I'm making. They're
No.
comparing us to far superior properties and then assessing it at the same value as these really good properties without making any change in the unit sale price.
Well, in all fairness to the assessor, they're not putting the value on it, the model is. The model's
Oh,
analog
yes, absolutely.
sales,
Yes.
and they're
Yeah.
coming here deciding whether they should defend it or reduce it. It's, as a professionals, they're gonna decide whether to defend it based on the evidence presented at the hearing or that they've got in front of them, or to revise it downwards. So in this case, you're appearing here to defend the assessment that the model created.
Yeah.
And I just, excuse me, I'm just questioning why. I'm questioning some of your methodology, I guess, as
Yeah.
compared.
Well, there's kind of two tacks that do get confusing. I'm comparing it specifically to parking lot sales. And then at the end, I'm throwing in, okay, it's almost worthless as a parking lot.
Yeah,
Let's have a quick look at development sites.
yeah, okay.
That's essentially.
So I guess my last question is, it's the concept of highest and best use, because that's what we're dealing with here, aren't we?
Yeah.
Obviously, the income approach is undervaluing it. I think that's what, maybe I'm putting
Fair.
words
Yeah.
out, so you're conceding that it should be not done on the income approach, it should be done on the land comparison sales approach, right?
Yes, I see what you're saying, but the chances of it being anything other than a parking lot for a long time are small. So anybody buying this property knows they're going to have on their hands a long wait till the market catches up with the cost of building and so forth, that are going to be operating a money-losing parking lot for an indefinite number of years before they manage to attract a buyer willing to redevelop this site, which on a list of developable sites in downtown Winnipeg, it's not in the top 100. So it's a long wait till this one gets developed.
Okay. To your knowledge, has it ever been offered up for sale?
It, as I was saying earlier, all surface parking lots are de facto for sale signs.
No, but
For
my question
transitory use,
listed it
any
for-
developer just knows that if they wanted to develop something, all they got to do is drive down the street and pick out a surface parking lot and call the owner.
Have they ever listed it for sale, to your knowledge?
No.
No, okay. All right. That's all my question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. McClovery, I'm looking at your page 10, and I note that you have one of the properties you referred to, which is the one that I think is probably your best comparison, is 64 Donald Street. It's pretty close to the subject, and it's a little bit bigger, but sold in 2022, which is a good timing.
Yeah, that one it is geographically close. It's far superior. It's got brand new bumper fencing, brand new concrete, brand new plug-ins. And also, let me just go to my notes here for 1 second, please. And it's, yeah, very good condition, new concrete pavement, newer wood bumper fencing, new hydro plug-ins, sold off market in a much more densely developed area with office buildings, apartments, etc. It's right next door to that big apartment building, and it's got great local characteristics. It's got a lot more parking demand than ours. If I know we can't all get up and drive by it, but if you were to drive by it, it's a really good parking lot.
And
Perfect
who did
shape.
those improvements? The new owner, or were they available when it was sold?
No, it was sold in perfect condition. It was, yeah. So that description is the way it was when it sold. And it in my notes here, I'll just read them to you. This property sold off market without representation by a broker or agent. The sale price may have been influenced by circumstances or considerations of which the writer is unaware. So off-market sales, we use them, but you always quantify them with, you don't know who the circumstances behind the sale. It was never offered on the open market. So there could be considerations that you just don't know about.
Yeah.
But it's far superior property.
Yeah, it's possible it's sold within the family, and they took
Sure.
into account that there's no real estate fees to pay and things like that. Then,
Yeah, or it could have
so the
been,
market might have gone. So I'm saying on the market it might have gone higher.
or lower. It could be,
Well-
yeah, you sell me this apartment building for 2 million and I'll give you this one back for, like, there's so many different variables. You just don't know the circumstances.
Yeah, I like the city's comparables at 240 St. Mary Avenue. I like their comparables at 175 Donald and 330 Donald. Why didn't you use any of those?
The one at, let me go to their brief. The one at 330 Donald, that's the one that's on the big prominent signaled intersection at Ellis and Donald. It's a big,
Yeah, but-
it's a really,
But like Mr. Hutchings said to you, you take it and you can say it's superior and you downgrade it to the
Yeah.
subject property, but it still seems to be a more equivalent sale than some of your comparables that are not really in the vicinity.
well, if you're looking at meters from the subject, yeah, that one's closer, but it's night and day. Like it's like I'm an interior lot on a really low traffic street, and that's a corner lot on a big signaled intersection, a prominent downtown intersection.
Okay, and 175?
And 175, Donald?
Yeah,
That was the one, I think, did I use that one? Oh,
no, you didn't use
175,
it.
Donald. It's just so small. It's 3,000 square feet.
Yeah,
It's
but
just, you know, you get odd numbers on little wee parcels like that. Like it's not big enough to, it's just, to me, it's not relevant because it's just so small.
okay, so its proximity doesn't mean anything to you then.
Well, it means, that means more than anything, but when you're 3,000 square feet, it's almost like a remnant. It's not, it's certainly a property that could never be developed with anything, so it's it's not a standalone property. It's almost like a little remnant that yeah, I would have kicked that out just for being too small.
Same thing with 240 St. Mary Avenue, which is adjacent to such a property.
Yeah, 240 St. Mary Avenue, that one is a parking lot, but it wasn't operating as a commercial parking lot. It's sold. It was a parking lot for a business, if I'm not mistaken, or it was acquired, pardon me. Let me just see if I have that one in my notes, if you can bear with me a moment. Just be 1 second, 240. No, I don't have that in my notes, but I think I know which property it is, and it's a very small property behind oh, what was that hotel that burnt down? Can't remember the name of it, but anyway, it's another little wee property. It's not a commercial parking lot. It was just for a business sales. It wasn't managed by Park, or it wasn't, it's a different kettle of fish.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's my question. And so we've completed this matter, and I'm going to ask for, let's say, a 7-minute break till 3:05.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harland. We'll next proceed with agenda item number 7, which is an unnumbered property on Bond Street, and the assessment can present their evidence when they're ready.
File number 24-226, roll number 1209-369-2000. Address is 0 Wong Street, owner Harvick Investments Inc. The property is valued at $1,327,000 for 2025 with the reference date of 1st April 2023. The land area for the subject property is 10,862 square feet. The property is located at the intersection of Graham and Bond Street. The subject property has a rectangular size shape lot, which is managed by Park. Page number 3 has an aerial photograph of the subject property. Page 4, as previously, we have the parking rent comparables. The property is assessed using line approach. So we'll be ignoring from page number 4 to page number 6. Page number 7 has land comparables. Most of the comparables are near to the subject property. Comparable number 4 would be the best comparable when compared to the subject property. The subject property has 10,862 square feet area. The comparable number 4, which is known as the best comparable in my analysis, has an 18,000 square feet area. The subject property is valued at $122 per square feet. The subject and the comparable is valued at $132 square feet. When we go through comparable number 1 to 6, we have a mean of $133, which shows that it is higher to what our valuation for land came up for the subject property. Page number 8 and page number 9 have the income and expense mailer that was filled out and submitted back to the city of Winnipeg, Assessment and Taxation Department. Page number 10 and 9, page number 10 to 19 have the aerial view, street view, and the maps for the parking lot comparables, for the rent comparable. And pages 20 to 31 show the land comparables. Show the land comparables. So to conclude, I would ask the board to maintain the 2025 assessment value for $1,327,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. McAubry?
Yes, please. I would just like to ask the assessor if he considered the income approach on this particular property.
No, the valuation for this property was based on land value.
Okay, and that was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, any questions?
No, I am good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Winkler, any questions?
I'm sorry, I have no questions.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the disclosure, just for interest's sake. I know you're not using the income approach, but disclosure sheet on page 8 of your presentation, it shows net operating income of $65,960.15. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, Mr.
And if we use an income approach, what cap rate would be utilized?
Be around 5%, looks like a lot.
Okay. So that would do. Okay, so that would come to 1,318,320. So pretty close to its assessment. Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions. Mr. McAubry, you can present your evidence.
Yes, I'd like to start with the income approach to value, which is, in my view, the most relevant approach. And it was easily done on this. There's no reason not to use the income approach. In fact, we did both approaches, the direct comparison approach and the income approach, and they reconciled very well and were mutually supportive. If you look at my presentation that I provided, the direct comparison approach came in at 925,000 and the income approach came in at 990,000. So I think the assessment department should have done an income approach. It was the most appropriate approach, and there was no extraordinary circumstances like there are on some parking lots where you just can't apply it because they're not viable. It's a viable parking lot that has pretty good income, and it will remain a viable parking lot, I think, for many years. As far as the cap rate, when I did our application of the income approach, we came up with a net operating income of $74,251. And of course, that's based on audited financial statements and normalized to take out any additional management items that some people might put in. So we stripped it down, got the NOI to $74,251. The cap rate, we were using a cap rate of 7.25% to 7.75%. We ended up at 7.5%. And if I can refer you to page 16 of my submission, you can see the matrix on the valuation where we have put it in at 990,000. So I don't think the city and ourselves are really at odds. We're not debating the NOI really. So we're very similar. And the cap rates, we seem to have a difference. The gentleman, when you asked, said a 5% cap rate. That's reserved for the very best investment vehicles in Winnipeg. A well-maintained parking lot or a well-maintained apartment block in a good neighborhood this cap rate that we've got that we've put on is 7.5%. Is more typical of a Class B office building in downtown Winnipeg, and I think more appropriate for this. So the income approach, if they'd done one, really would agree with ours, except for the cap rate. And if the panel reads my submission, I think they'll see some good arguments about why the cap rate should be higher. So if we bounce over to the comparison approach, again, not to relate back to previous submissions and arguments, but our comparable sales that we used, I think were good sales, and they were adjusted appropriately for time. And the argument for the time adjustments are contained in the written document that I provided. And I think there's strong evidence for a reduction in value, not the enormous reduction that we've discussed on other parking lots, but we are looking for a reduction down to, and pardon me for scrolling up here, down to $958,000. And again, strongly supported by the income approach and the direct comparison versus the city's assessed value of $1,327,000. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kupfer or Assessment Department, any questions?
Mr. Rattan's gonna lead us off on this one.
So as per page 16, you refer the cap rate should be between 7.25 to 7.775. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're basing it off as per page 15. Is that correct?
Yes.
But upon reading through your table, I see that most of the comparables or your cap rate study includes strip malls or commercial multi-tenant buildings. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Shouldn't this be more significant to the vacant commercial lots or parking lots for the cap rate study?
Yeah, definitely. And there just weren't any cap rates we were able to extract from parking lot sales. There have been a few parking lot sales. We weren't able to get reliable net income information. So I presented a representative sampling of good quality investment opportunities, such as commercial multi-tenant strip centers, to essentially set a floor that we can see that neighborhood shopping centers and good quality real estate are seeing cap rates between 5.4 and 7.4 with a mean average of 6.2. And then I go on to argue that we should be near the high end of that because we're clearly not as good as some of the properties showing the lower cap rates.
So, but when we go for your analysis on page number 16, the cap rate starts from 7.25 to 7.775.
Yeah.
And if I heard it right, you mentioned that these are based off of the calculations done by Class B office downtown properties. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that is more instructive as to what the risk characteristics are of the Vaughan Street parking lot, comparing it to a Class B office building in the downtown.
So as per you, like the office Class B and the vacant parking lot at Vaughan Street would have the same kind of risk carrying factors. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But can that be supported by any evidence here?
Well, it's an opinion, as all cap rates are. In my opinion, that a good Class B office building, and Class B, it doesn't sound good, but a Class B office is a solid office building in the downtown. It might be built in the 1980s, but a Class B office building is an equally desirable investment in my mind. And the cap rates that we're quoting on Class B, those aren't extracted from market sales. Those are just market brokerage estimates provided by Colliers and Cushman. And you can see even themselves, if you look at those, Colliers thinks a Class B cap rate 6.25 to 7, and Cushman Wakefield thinks it's 7.5 to 8.5. So there can be a pretty substantial variance in cap rates, even among people such as this who do nothing but sell Class B office buildings.
Shouldn't this data be supported in the manner that was done for the neighborhood strip malls? Because what I understood was we are basing the cap rate using the strip mall comparables, but then we came up to the office class B, which can be only extracted by the broker's information.
Yeah, but just to reiterate, the cap rates that I'm presenting, I'm not saying that we're equal to them. I'm saying that here's a sampling of cap rates, and we should be higher than all of those. Those are, a neighborhood shopping center on Pembina would be perceived to be less risky than a property in downtown Winnipeg. So I'm not presenting those cap rates with the suggestion they're equal to ours. I'm suggesting our cap rate should be significantly higher than the tabled ones.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No, I don't have.
Just have a couple questions to follow up, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine. Go ahead and ask them.
Your page 17, your reconciliation of value. And I noticed this on your last report as well. You provided two values, and then you seem to have chosen a number somewhere in the middle rather than choosing the value that resulted in the highest valuation. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I look at what I consider the quality of the evidence. And when I go to the middle, I'm essentially saying that I looked at the quality of the data considered in each approach and decided that they were equally valid. One wasn't significantly superior than the other, and I just simply went to the midpoint of the range.
Stated that the operating income, the NOI that you derived for this was based off of some sort of audited financials. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Does that number differ from that presented in the income and expense mailer?
Yeah, I think it does. I don't have that right in front of me, but I noticed in some of them, and it's just a misunderstanding that people will include management fees, but it's being managed by Impark, and they're taking up a lot of the management duties. So the way I would reconstruct their financial statements is undoubtedly going to be slightly different than the reconstruction by the clerk who sent in the city forms.
Those are all my questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Linkletter, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. To the applicant. So you presented you asked to be valued on the income approach, and you came up with a calculation of 990,000, and yet you're requesting 958,000. You said you considered both approaches to value equal, so you kind of went in the middle somewhere.
Right.
Okay, that's okay. That explains it. And my last question is, okay, you also stated that the cap rate you're presenting with those commercial properties wasn't really relevant to the subject property. Did I hear that right?
No, again, we're going back to bracketing. I didn't have any cap rates extracted from parking lot sales. We just didn't have that. They're not readily available, and there's only been a few sales in that time. So I wanted to show what cap rates were on good quality investment vehicles in Winnipeg. And I know the assessor had suggested in early conversation that the cap rate for a parking lot like that should be about 5. Well, in my presentation, I am showing that even good neighborhood shopping center, commercial multi-tenant, you're looking at, they're experiencing cap rates of 6 and 7 and 5.5. So 5's off the board. And in my opinion, based on the cap rates being achieved by safer, better investments, we should be at least a point or so higher than that. And,
Okay.
I thought 7.5 was very fair.
Now I'm going to ask you a question, although you didn't present the evidence. Would cap rates on vacant land be relevant?
No, I mean, there are vacant land cap rates for ground leases, but they're really, I don't think they are relevant in this instance.
Okay.
And they wouldn't be a lot different than 7.5 either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask the assessor a question arising from that comment, please.
Go ahead, Mr. Hutchins.
Mr. Kupfer, do you have any experience on cap rates on vacant land that have commercial zoning on them? I'm not sure if you do or not, but I thought I'd ask.
Not within our brief, of course.
Yeah, that's right.
What's quite common with these parking lots when they sell is they're developed, they don't often continue as parking lots. Sometimes they do, sometimes they won't. Generally, when we perceive a cap rate, the largest factor in that is risk, right? The higher the cap rate, the larger the risk in this property. And for a surface parking lot, we see them as very low risk properties. So our model generally applies a low cap rate to them, generally in the 4.5% to 5.5% range.
Okay, so that's where you come up with that range in the 5%. Perfect. That answers my question. Thank you. And I have no other questions from the applicant.
Thank you. You have more questions for the applicant, did you say?
No, I have no more. I'm sorry. No more.
That's fine. Okay, thank you. I have Mr. McAubrey. So you've said you think that if you're going to go with cap rates, you'd be looking at like 7.5%, and you're
Yeah.
basing it on strip malls and or Class B office buildings downtown. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And there's quite a bit of a risk of operating a building downtown. You've got possibilities that the building would need a lot of upkeep, and you could have another COVID situation where tenants move out. I'm just asking the risk of a surface parking lot. There's no investment really, other than maybe some paving and some railings. So there's really very little capital cost that's going to be required to maintain it. So wouldn't a purchaser look at the fact that if Canada bonds were paying, let's say 4%, if they can get 5% cap rate on a surface parking lot and possibly have some redevelopment down the line in the future that give them a real bonanza, why wouldn't that be compelling?
Well, it's an interesting point you make. I think the income from a parking lot has proven itself to not be dependable. We've seen about a 30% drop in the past 3 years because of things like ride sharing and high office vacancy and Uber. And I think those are described on page 16 of my submission, some of the problems with why why parking lots are perceived to be a risky investment. So I think there's a prudent investor would be much happier with a neighborhood shopping center on Pembina Highway, which right now, or at the base year of the effective date of the appraisal, retail vacancy rates were under 5%. And, with all the step ups that you have in the leases on a shopping center, far better investment. And we can see from my scheduled cap rates, that one on Pembina Highway, which is a beauty, great tenants, cap rate is 7.42. And I don't think anybody would look at a surface parking lot on Vaughan Street and consider it a safer one. And the burden of management is zero because the one on Pembina Highway, of course, you have professional management built right into that cap rate. You don't have to do anything.
Okay, so Mr. Copper, you think you've just answered my question then? You think you've given me an answer to my question?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Okay, because I'm looking at your net operating income, which you show is 74,251, which is, if you cap that at 5%, you'd have a valuation of 1,485,000.
Yeah, but it would be completely inappropriate to cap it at 5%.
Well,
No investor would take
well,
that property
that's
at
your,
a 5%
okay,
cap
that's
rate.
your opinion, and I'll accept that.
And with respect, the assessor didn't even present any cap rate evidence.
No, I know you did. I'm
An
questioning it's
unsubstantiated,
not the assessors.
he presented an array of cap rates all over the place, and he essentially plucked 5% because it serves the purpose. 5% is not appropriate.
Excuse me, I heard him. He responded to Mr. Hutchins' question and indicated that we're looking at 4.5% to 5% is what the city would look at if they were using a cap rate and income approach on this.
I don't think they would, and that's why they didn't do an income approach. Why didn't they do an income approach and show us that 5% cap rate and stand behind it?
Well, they're not using an income approach. You were, so that's what we're questioning.
To their peril. I mean, it's an income property, and they should have used an income approach.
Well, that's your opinion again, Mr. Bacopi, and that's fine. You're entitled to that. Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. So that takes us then to item number 8, which is 370 Smith Street. And Assessment Department, I'm not sure who's going to be present. You can go ahead with your evidence.
File number 24-217, roll number 130-960-86500. Property address 370 Smith Street, property owner Harvick Investments Inc. 2025 assessment value $767,000 with a reference date of April 1, 2023. The land area for the subject property is 8525 square feet. The subject property is valued at land intersection of Donald and Smith Street, and it can be accessed either from Donald Street or from Smith Street, and it is next to a theater. As per the photographs presented in page 2, the subject property has a triangular shaped lot and is managed by Empire. Moving on to the page 4, we have an aerial photograph of the subject property. Page 4 represents there are no recent sale histories. Page 5 again has the parking rent comparables, which can be ignored because I'm going to use the land approach to value this subject property. Moving on to the page 8, I have 8 comparables for the subject property. The zoning for most of the comparable is C. The best comparable for my subject property would be comparable number 5, which is 170 Bannatyne Avenue, which is almost similar to the subject property size. It has 11,140 square feet, whereas the subject property is approximately 8,500 square feet. It is valued at $95, whereas the subject property is valued at $89.97. The comparable is also at an irregular shaped lot, which can be seen on page number 2. So if we move on to the page 32 on my evidence, we can see the comparable that I'm referring to. It is an irregular size shaped lot, which is similar to the subject property. And with it, yes, it is more in size, but the shape is irregular. It's also managed by Embark, and it's also near to the subject property. So the distance from the subject property to the comparable is only 3 minutes drive time and 8 minutes walk time. So I would say this is the best comparable for my subject property. Now, moving back to page number 9 and page number 10, we have the income and expense mailer filled out by the property management company. Pages 11 to pages 24 have the aerial view, street view, and the map pictures of the comparables. And pages 25 to 39 have the aerial view, street view, and the map view for the land comparables. So to conclude, I would like the board to maintain the 2025 assessment value for 767,000 for the subject property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCoby. Any questions?
One question to the assessor. It happened not long before the assessment date, but were you aware that the access to the property from Smith Street has been closed due to forever closed due to a realignment of Smith Street?
No, I'm not available.
All right, that was my only question.
Mr. Hutchings, any questions?
Yes, please, to the assessor, and I know you're not using the income approach to value, but I think when we look on the submitted income and expense statement, they're claiming a 60% expense ratio in a parking lot. Would that be, is that in line with your experience of parking lots? Just out of curiosity.
Usually it should be roughly around 50%, not the 60%.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question.
My only question is, I'm looking at it and it's a fairly small lot and it's very irregular in shape. So would that be an easy property to develop?
It's not of the regular size shape lot, that's very true, but the comparable that I have is of the similar, is also of a irregular shape, which was again sold for $95 per square feet. So that kind of lots are still in demand depending on their location and what kind of features that we can get it from there. So depending on their location, proximity, and the pricing for parking the cars there.
And that's the property that your comparable number 7, was that it?
Comparable number 5.
5?
Yes, 170 Valentine.
Okay. And 170 Bannatyne is, okay. A little bit larger, but not hugely larger. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So I've got no further questions. So Mr. Cooper, you can present your evidence.
Thank you. This particular property in late 2022, and I'm just going to refer to my notes. Bear with me for one moment. The city closed the Smith Street, and I'm just scrolling as I speak, so sorry about this, but we'll just get this right. Smith Street was realigned in late 2022 to become part of an expanded Odeon Park. The section of Smith Street abutting the subject site is permanently closed. This closes the busiest access to the subject lot via northbound Smith Street and reduces access from 2 points to just 1 point, southbound Princess Street. It is reasonable to expect this change to have a significant impact on the subject property's gross revenue. Prospective buyers for the subject property would be rightfully nervous about the closure of the subject property's primary access and the effect this will have on future parking revenues. So prior to the effective date of this report, they closed Smith Street. So now the only people accessing this site are northbound Princess. So you close the primary access and now the secondary access. And I know we're not to consider post-effective date information, but in conversations with the owners, they say the effect was immediate and catastrophic. It's just the revenues on this lot plummeted from the moment they closed the primary access on Smith Street. So its viability as a parking lot, which was already low, is terrible. And again, to reiterate comments I've made before, an empty parking lot is a for sale sign, and nobody's chosen to develop this site for decades, and it could be decades more before anybody does. It's not a very attractive site. It's triangular. It's on a busy corner. You would have good exposure, but you'd be compromised as to what you could put on this site. So it's not an attractive development site. And for the holding period while you wait for a developer, it's not an attractive parking lot. So in consideration of all of that, we're asking for a large reduction in assessed value. We've put the appraisal in at $340,000 as compared to the city of Winnipeg's assessed value of $767,000. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions, Assistant Department?
Just one moment, yes, sir. The land sale comparables look familiar. Are these largely the ones that were submitted for the first property that we discussed?
I would think so. We were working with a fairly small number of available parking lot sales, and we just touched on some development sales. We didn't find very great or very good comparable sales for development sites near the effective date of the report. So it is the same tabled sales.
So if the property were to be developed, whether it be for small scale multifamily or office or retail use, and that street is closed, wouldn't less traffic and a new park across the street both be positive influences for development?
Yeah, they would definitely be better than traffic, absolutely. But I think we're talking about moving from a terrible development site to a slightly less terrible development site. I would suggest that this site will remain a parking lot for decades. It just is one of those sites that you put a $2 million building on it and it'll be worth less than $2 million when you're done. So it does improve the site as a development site. I concede that, but not to the point that anybody's going to develop it for the foreseeable future.
That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking on page 5 of your presentation to the applicant, please.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, that change to making that, say adding the park was done post-reference, is that correct?
Adding the park was done and the road was closed late 2022. So
Okay.
cars could no longer access the parking lot. As for completion of the construction of the park, it happened sometime in 2023. I'm not sure when it was completed.
Okay. Now I'm looking at your map and first of all, location. This is on the north side of the Burton Cummings Theater, is that correct?
Right on the north side, yeah.
Okay, so now to access that parking lot, you would go take the new road that's being carved out along the east side of the park to make a left turn, a left turn on Donald and pull into the parking lot. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Okay. I guess what I'm getting at is anybody knows this lot knows that it would be easy accessible by just making that U-turn.
Yeah, when you're right, though, when you get at that corner, it's if you don't know, it's definitely confusing, and most people would probably choose to just park on that giant lot right across the street
Okay,
on Smith, as you see in the picture. But, again, in the short time between the closure of that street and the effective date of this report, the owners have expressed a huge drop in parking revenue. Though, again, that's just the parking side of the equation. We're also looking at its value as a development site, which is a different argument.
okay. And just to confirm, the land valuation at the requested assessment of $340,000, I believe that's what you're asking for?
That's correct. Yeah.
Be about approximately $40 a square foot for land. Okay. But you're going between a split of the income approach and the land valuation comparison, is that right?
Let me just have a quick look here. I'm just going to scroll down. Actually, I went with the income approach.
Oh, okay.
We thought the quality of data in this approach was superior, is what I said in my remarks.
Okay. I'm just trying to find you here. What did you come up in value on the land? I know you've done a comparison, but I can't find it here. Of the two.
On the land and the direct comparison approach,
Yeah,
you just see that would be on page, the conclusion is on page 14 of my
Right.
submission.
370,000. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchings. Ms. Ladder, any questions?
My question was asked by Mr. Hutchings in regards to access to the parking lot. So I am good. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have no questions, so thank you very much. So thank you, Mr. McCovery. We'll consider your matters, render decisions. You receive them very shortly through the mail.
Thank you for your time. And if I could just in closing encourage, I know you guys are hearing a lot of stuff and a lot of submissions, but I hope you have time to at least skim the written material provided. And I do feel that there's some good arguments there that should be considered in your decision.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Today. So we have one remaining matter that we have to deal with. That is item number 1, and we can go back to it. Ms. Hardland, is there an attendance on item number 1 yet?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I think we have to go into camera to determine whether we're going to hear this matter or not.
All right, I will take us offline. Just a moment, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we can then proceed then with item number 1 on the agenda today, and I can tell you that we have determined that there's no appearance in this matter, so we'll proceed in the absence of the applicant. And so you can go forward with your application, Assistant Department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to bring up non-compliance here, since there was no income and expense meter filled out.
Okay, and if you want to take us through the evidence, I can just say, and one thing though is that as there's no attendance, well, you don't know me, that's true. Okay, please proceed.
So if we go on to page number 5 of my evidence, we can see that income and expense mailer request was sent to the property owner on April 13th. Moving on to the pages, April 11th, there was another notice sent to them on June 9th, asking them to fill out the income and expense mailer. Page number 15 show the acceptance from Canada Post that they accepted our income and expense mailers. And Page number 60 shows the tracking number with the tracking progress for the delivery of our income and expense mailer. So to conclude, so from the above evidence, we would seek a non-corporation in this current situation.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any question, Mr. Hutchins?
None at all, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Linkletter, any questions?
I have none, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and I don't have any either, but we do have to go into camera again to determine whether we're going to grant your application or not. Thank you. So you've established that there is non-cooperation and we're granting your application. Unfortunately, as the applicant is not present, we will not enable him to go first. So you have to proceed with your evidence and you can do so when you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 24-1144, roll number 130-610-11000, 2025 assessment value $298,000 with a reference date of April 1, 2023. We would like to ask board to maintain the 2025 assessment value of $298,000 based on income approach. If we go on to the page 2, I have the subject property photographs. It's a rectangular size shaped lot, which is located between Adelaide and Benedictine Avenue. Now moving on forward from page 5 to page 16, we have the income and expense mailers, which were not filled properly. Page 17 have some rent comparables. I have 7 rent comparables for the subject property. The best rent comparable for my subject property would be 211 McDermott Avenue with a store count of 28. Subject property has 24 store counts. So that would be the so the subject property only has 24 store counts, whereas the best comparable at 211 McDermott has 28 store counts. The distance between subject property to the comparable is only 2 minutes drive. So that's why I chose that comparable as the best comparable. Page 18 talk about our income approach. It says that we are valuing our parking stalls at $51.75. We have 24 stalls, that comes to $14,904. We are capitalizing it at 5%, bringing up the capitalization value at $298,000. Moving forward, we have land sale comparables. I also put some land sale comparables for the subject property. We have 12 of them. Moving forward from page 23 to page 36, we have the photographs for the rent comparables showing an aerial photograph, side view, and a map photographs. And from page 37 to 60, we have the photographs of land comparable showing an aerial view, street view, and a map. So to conclude with, I would ask the board to maintain the 2025 assessment value of $298,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Hitchens?
Yeah, I gotta ask.
Yeah. I know you could ask.
Is there a calculation for the land value only? We've got 14,904 square feet with land comparables selling at a mean of let's say $115 a square foot. But you decided just to go with the income approach, is that correct?
Yes, we would like to go with income approach on this one.
Okay. All right. I'll have to figure that one out. Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Linkletter, any questions?
Well, I'm just gonna sort of dig a little further what Mr. Hutchings just asked. Why why are you going with the income approach on this property and not the others?
So as mentioned earlier, we do a mass appraisal method. So that means like we generate two values for the subject property. One is income and one is land property. So in this particular case, the land value property wasn't supported enough using the model, so we have to use the income method to value it. So the valuation for the land value was really low.
Okay. And just, can you speak to, and I know it's a really old sale, but page 4 of your brief, there's a sale in October of 2001 for $855. Do you have any information on that sale? Is it just this parking lot, or was it a multiple sale?
Unfortunately, I haven't looked into it.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, I had the same question. I was wondering why you used the income approach on this one and all the others used land value. So we are using the income approach, I guess. And I'm looking at your table on page 17. I see that there's different expense ratios, and they're drastically different, from 77% to as low as 27%. How does the model calculate the expense ratios?
So you're correct that we have quite a variation, particularly in this reporting cycle. These are based on 2022 INEs that we would have received. And this was pointed out, I think, multiple times today. COVID did take quite an impact over certain properties, particularly certain downtown parking lots. So whether that's due to a reduction in the income that they received or an increase in the expenses, you can't tell based on simply this table. But generally speaking and historically, as Mr. Rattan indicated, our expense ratios on these parking lots is between about 45 and 55%. And our model takes in effectively as much information as it can. And it doesn't just take a full average like that, but we work with it to try and come up with something dependable and representative of the market.
Okay, so taking that into account, then I'm looking at the table again, and it shows monthly and daily. Those that all come off of reports from various owners, I guess, of the properties on their disclosures every year.
Yeah, so on our income and expense mailer, we have a spot. Here, I'll be page. On page 13, on the bottom right corner of the table, you'll see parking stall, hourly rates, daily rates, and monthly rates. Not all property owners fill this out, but when they do, we use that information to populate the table. When we don't, we simply leave it blank.
Okay. So that's where that comes from. And how are the monthly rates stabilized? To get the stabilized rate? Do you know how that's worked out by the model?
The stabilized NOI per stall per month is supposed to be the same representation of what our model generates. So it's a calculation that's done again based off of the reporting through the income and expense mailer. So if they report $50,000 in NOI, that number is then divided by 12 months in the year, and then divided by the stall count, which is also reported to produce the stabilized NOI per stall per month.
Okay, so your parking lot comparables are all right off of the mailers, and
Yes, sir.
okay, that completes my question. Thank you very much. So we've now heard all the items on the agenda today, and we will make our decisions, and they'll be out very soon. Thank you for your attendance and your briefs.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'll go take us offline, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Hartland.